Start with contracting sprites. Chapter 276, Don't be cowardly, just do it. In just a moment. The sprite of the Dragon Nation sprite trainer on the right, defeated the sprite from Peacock Nation on the left. Dragon Nation's sprite trainer wins. He looked at it for a while and finally understood. The battle in front of him was, to fight for a slot. Whoever entered earlier or slower, whichever nation had the first batch of sprite trainers, would have an advantage when competing for the opportunities in the ruins. But everyone was a part of the Union, and they were all civilized people. Then, they would use the method of a civilized sprite trainer to solve the problem. There was nothing that couldn't be done with one battle. If there was, then there would be two. In front of him was a battle with one person, one sprite. The results of the battle would determine the nation's slots. After the first round ended, the next round started shortly after. He saw that Mentor Ma had also gone on stage. He used a Cloud Water Dragon Horse to defeat the opponent in 2 to 3 moves. As expected of a first-level instructor at Dragon City University. Dragon Nation won 7 out of the first 10 rounds, which made Senior Zhang and the others very excited. But gradually. Damn it! Not good. The top experts from Peacock Nation and the other countries are inferior to us, but there are actually more top-level experts than us. There's no other way, they have too many people. In terms of individual national sprite trainers, Dragon Nation was naturally the largest, but the 3 strong countries, Peacock Nation and Korean Nation, had already joined forces to compete for more say in the exploration of the ruins. At this moment, a Korean sprite trainer strode forward and looked towards the crowd from the Dragon Nation with his chin raised. Who in your Dragon Nation dares to battle me? Samita 1. This round, it was the sprite trainers from Samita Nation who attacked first. He called for a sprite, a python more than 20 meters long with lightning patterns all over its body. It slowly swam onto the field and breathed lightning. That person is called Park Yushin. His thunder cloud python is very strong, theirs. A young man recognized the sprite trainer opposite him. Many people discussed in low voices and shook their heads. Seeing this scene, Xiao knew clearly that the surrounding master-level players weren't very confident. As long as there was a 40 to 50% chance, someone would step forward, but if the chance was too low, they wouldn't dare to fight. That wasn't a matter of whether they had the courage, but they were afraid that they would give it up for nothing. The Dragon Nation sprite trainers present were actually more polarized. The stronger ones were master level, high level, and quasi-heavenly king level. The weak ones were the relatively young masters. It couldn't be helped. Although the number and strength of the Dragon Nation's sprite trainers far exceeded the 3 countries of the Korean nation, there were also much more territories and cities that needed to be stationed. Many sprite trainers had important positions. Most of the people who came here today were young masters who were on holiday and happened to have time. The accumulation of sprites was slightly lacking. For example, Wang Qi, Zhang Zihoki and the others were among the best among their peers, but among master-level sprite trainers, they were very ordinary. But the Thunder Cloud Python on the other side isn't that strong either. It isn't completely hopeless. He patted Zhang Zihoki's shoulder and said, "Senior, don't be a coward. *CK it head on. Whether we can get a spot for our Dragon Nation depends on you." "Ah, me." Zhang Zihoki, who had just entered the first year of the master level, didn't have much confidence. Xiao guided him patiently. "Senior, think about it. During the league, the Goathorn Immortal was already not weak. After the tournament, it also absorbed a treasure. It's equivalent to cultivating for half a year and a year. Right now, its strength has already improved greatly." Zhang Zihoki nodded slightly. Goathorn Immortal has a slight advantage in attributes and battle methods against the Thunder Cloud Python. Zhang Zihoki thought about it and nodded. That Thundercloud Python has more accumulation, but it also has its weaknesses. Xiao pretended to observe for a while and proposed tactical guidance targetedly. As long as this was the case, then, as expected, the light in Senior Jiang's eyes became much more confident. 10,000 wood formation. On the field, vines and trees broke out of the ground. In the blink of an eye, the whole field became a forest of vines and trees. The Goathorn Immortal was professional at planting trees. In Vinewood Forest, the Thunder Cloud Python released endless lightning. With a sweep of its tail, large amounts of vines broke and flew out. However, it relied on its physical strength. The damage caused by the lightning to the vinewood wasn't that great, it was all absorbed and directed to the ground. As I expected, that thundercloud python's physical body is weak. Most of its strength comes from thunder. At the start, it didn't use a sharp and lethal unique skill. Instead, it planned to set up a lightning field. From then on, it had already lost more than half of the battle. Senior Wang Qi, Senior Qinye, and the others didn't quite understand. They only felt that it was very impressive. With just one look, he saw the operation on the opposite side clearly. Su Hao glanced at the interface. As his horizons improved and his knowledge reserves became richer, the information on sprites shown on the interface indeed became more detailed. Before the battle, he had already seen the cultivation and battle system of the Thundercloud Python. As expected of me. The battle lasted for 7 to 8 minutes. The vines and woods were continuously destroyed and produced, trapping the Thundercloud Python tightly. Then, it used unique skills such as Parasite Vine and Hypnotizing Pollen to exhaust the Thundercloud Python until it lost its battle power. The Goathorn Immortal won with weak spiritual force residue. Junior is awesome. Senior Zhang, who returned victorious, shouted. It was the Dragon Nation Sprite trainers' turn to attack in the next round. As expected, they lost. Su Hao had no choice. He couldn't send a voice transmission to the contestants during the battle, right? Sound transmission. He seemed to have an idea. At this moment, it was the other party's turn to attack again. The one on the field was a sprite trainer from the Japanese nation. He summoned a metal Tyrannosaurus. It was 5 to 6 meters tall, with 2 thick hind legs. Its whole body seemed to be made of metal, glistening under the sunlight. But Su Hao frowned. What's wrong? Zhang Zihuqi asked. Su Hao said, this metal Tyrannosaurus is stronger than the Thunder Cloud Python just now. It was not just a little stronger. He originally wanted to let Senior Wang Qi Red Flame Kaiang Qi fight, but he made a rough guess and thought that the chances of winning were too low. The difference between the two sprites was too big. The difference could no longer be gapped by some minor elemental advantage and tactical guidance. Why don't I go myself and send out the dazed crow? He thought for a moment. That won't do either. There's still a gap between a dazed crow and a truly powerful extraordinary level sprite. I'll do it. At this moment, a quiet voice came from the back of the crowd. The voice was slightly familiar. Su Hao turned around and saw a girl with long straight hair rushing over from afar on a storm god hound. The girl also recognized them as students from Whale Island University and nodded slightly. On the other hand, the storm god hound she was sitting on suddenly stopped when it passed by Su Hao's side and let out 2 extremely fierce growls. It seemed like it was still holding a grudge against him due to the league back then. The big white dog sniffed, and its eyes gradually glanced at Butterfly Xiao Dai who was lying on someone's head. It smelled a familiar scent. This dog would never forget this smell, woof. It remembers the dirty tricks played on him, woof. It remembers how it was defeated so badly, woof. Although the big white dog felt wronged, under the urging of its sprite trainer, it still stepped forward. Suddenly, a scene unfolded in its mind. It was the three-dimensional figure of the metal Tyrannosaurus opposite. Combat methods, weaknesses, possibly mastered unique skills, best response methods, etc. It was as if a voice was instilling everything into its mind. The big white dog shook its head. Wow, what a nice trick, woof. One simita is a common ending in Korean sentences. Chapter 277, The Strategist says Xiao Hao. Lanqing was wearing a white top and blue suspenders. Her dressing was as simple as ever, but it still couldn't conceal her unique temperament. She suddenly got up and jumped down from the big white dog. Her long black hair that wasn't tied up immediately fluttered outwards, and her thin body also drifted down like a breeze. It really seemed like she was floating down. She floated a few meters away and landed in front of Xiao Hao. A few strands of hair hung in front of her forehead under the sea breeze, and one couldn't help but want to push it away for her. "Thank you," Lanqing said softly, her voice like an empty valley orchid reaching his ears through the wind. Her slender fingers pushed aside the hair in front of her forehead, and she turned to walk towards the battlefield. Beside him, Zhang Zihoqi's eyes widened. He looked back and forth, revealing an indescribably wretched smile. "What did you do? What did you do?" "I didn't really do much." "Ah, no, pay attention to the battle." There was no cumbersome segment. After the two sprites stood still and both parties were ready, Lanqing didn't say anything. The big white dog flew over. Instantly, Lanqing's hair flew up again, and the surrounding wind became noisy. In Xiao Hao's eyes, under the status bar of the ordinary big white dog, there was an additional wind domain supplement message. It flashed. Bang! A storm swept over. The big white dog flashed left and right, shooting out its wind element unique skill from its mouth. Everywhere it passed, the beach field was blasted with smooth, bottomless holes. With speed advantage, flying advantage, long-range attack. Lanqing's Storm Godhound was good at close combat, but it was also the type that could also do well from afar. In comparison, the metal Tyrannosaurus opposite him. It's good at close combat and is an explosive sprite. There are only two long-range attacks that are threatening. Golden Light Blast and Metal Storm are both high-level unique skills with high-level proficiency. Other small moves like Golden Light Slash, on the other hand, didn't pose much of a threat. The Divine Stormhound had passed on the information to Lanqing's mind. She listened to the sound of the wind and looked calmly at the field. She saw that the metal Tyrannosaurus had used Golden Light Slash several times to no avail. Then, after it was annoyed by the Storm Godhound, it decisively opened its mouth, revealing metal blades like teeth. Extreme golden light gathered deep in its throat. In the next moment, a golden beam of light pierced through layers of air as well as the afterimage of the Storm Godhound. It shot into the sky from afar, leaving behind a dazzling golden light. It took a long time before it gradually dissipated. To use afterimage seduction, I have to maintain my position and risk getting hit in order to get the metal Tyrannosaurus to continuously use Golden Light Blast, consuming its spiritual force. At the same time, I'll continue attacking to keep the pressure on the other party and keep it from thinking. In this way, I'll probably be able to get it to waste about 3 to 8 more Golden Light Blast. The multiple Golden Light explosions were fruitless. The metal Tyrannosaurus could switch to Metal Storm, which had a wider range but a much larger consumption. As expected, a golden tornado enveloped the whole arena and spread to its surroundings, forcing the audience to retreat dozens of meters away. Amidst the storm, there was the sound of sharp blades tearing through the air. In an instant, the whole beach was filled with dense holes. The Storm Godhound, which was hiding on the side of the arena, scratched the ground with its sharp claws. Visible airflows bulged on its fluffy hair, forming a protective shield to resist the golden blades flying over from all directions. The metal Tyrannosaurus control over the metal storm is limited. During the casting process, it can't make many adjustments. If it continues to stay on the ground, it'll receive less damage than staying in the air. You're right. Lanqing, who looked calm on the surface, also felt waves in her heart. At this moment, after the metal storm passed, the big white dog's beautiful hair had already become very messy, and there were many scratches on its body. Injury is very necessary. If the metal Tyrannosaurus attack doesn't work, the opponent is very likely to change tactics and use a defensive counterattack. The battle time will be extended indefinitely, and there will be many uncertainties. The big white dog recalled those words. After blasting out a few seemingly powerful vacuum breaks, it widened its eyes and stuck out its tongue. Ha ha! This dog is so tired, woof. This dog is also injured, woof. It's true, woof. The big white dog continuously circled around the metal Tyrannosaurus on the opposite side. The injuries caused its speed to gradually slow down, and the power of the unique skill it spat out also weakened a little. The dog started to look like it couldn't take it anymore. In the end, when the metal Tyrannosaurus was rendered defenseless and unable to dodge due to excessive consumption, it was crippled by vacuum break after vacuum break. Its bell-sized eyes were filled with dissatisfaction. Why haven't you fallen yet? Storm God Hound, woof woof. Because this dog used tactics. Tactics are so fun, woof. The battle ended without much commotion. The difference between the two sprites wasn't too big, so it was reasonable for the Dragon Nation sprite trainer to win by a narrow margin. Only the sprite trainer from Japanese Nation complained a little. We were so close to winning. Of course, he was speaking in the Japanese language. Without any translation, Xiao didn't understand either. His understanding of the Japanese language was limited to a few words that were helpful for learning. The agreed battle had a total of 24 rounds. After Lanqing, Dragon Nation lost 4 rounds in a row. In fact, at this point, Dragon Nation had already won quite a lot of battles, but every additional victory would allow them to fight for a few more slots. Who would complain about having more slots? In those 4 rounds, Xiao also used Butterfly's sound transmission, no, shadow transmission to pass on analysis and tactics to their nation's sprites. It was more convenient and detailed than him using his mouth to convey the information. Unfortunately, not everyone believed him, and not every sprite had the ability to carry out his tactics. In contrast, the big white dog did a very good job. Dragon Nation will be the first to attack the next round. The master-level sprite trainers from Dragon Nation who had yet to go on stage looked at each other. Mentor Ma looked over. All right, I'll go. At this time, among the sprite trainers who came from Whale Island University, the ones who had already battled were Mentor Ma, a senior who had graduated for many years, Zhang Zaihoki and Wang Qi. Wang Qi had participated in the previous round. The degree of execution of Red Flame Kaiyan Ki tactics could score 70 points, but he was still defeated because the opponent was too strong. At this point, only Senior Qinya and 2 seniors who had graduated for many years had yet to battle. However, their aces weren't strong, so their chances of winning were at most 20%, which is already being generous. Xiao had no choice but to step forward and return the world to its glory. Cough. Under the gazes of everyone, he walked onto the field and started thinking. How can I win without exposing too much information? He passed the question to Butterfly to think about. Gurgle. Butterfly sighed, but there was also a sense of vicissitude in its helplessness. I knew it would be like this. It flapped its 3 pairs of emerald green butterfly wings and flew onto the field without returning to its original form. What kind of sprite is that? I don't know. It might be some form of transformed state. It doesn't look strong. Leave this to me. I can do it, I can definitely do it. A certain nation's sprite trainer was making a lot of noise. Many of the Dragon Nation's sprite trainers looked worried, only a small number, like Lanqing, who was sitting on the big white dog and looking ahead quietly, was thinking. I wonder what tactics he will use. The sprite that approached Xiao was a silly bear. Oh, he meant Tyrant Bear. It directly raised a sandstorm, countless gravel turned into spikes, stabbing towards the weak, pitiful but cute butterfly. Cute as justice. When many foreign sprite trainers saw this, their hearts were also lifted. Many beautiful young ladies couldn't help but close their eyes. When they opened their eyes again, they discovered that, the butterfly had disappeared. Where did it go? Come out! Come out if you have the guts! The sprite trainer of the naive bear roared. But apart from the sandstorm, there was no movement in front of him at all. He could only cast his gaze towards the Union's Heavenly King sprite trainer who was hosting the battle and thus remained neutral. Another Heavenly King sprite trainer crossed his arms and said, "It's still in the arena." The translator from Peacock Nation translated what the Heavenly King sprite trainer said. The brawny man could only look fiercely at Xiao, attempting to pressure him with his gaze. But time ticked away. Even when the sandstorm dissipated, that small figure didn't appear. Until a Heavenly King sprite trainer said, "Don't maliciously stall for time, or else there will be a yellow card warning." A Dragon Nation translator translated. All right. Xiao had no choice but to listen to him and reveal Butterfly. After all, he was a Heavenly King sprite trainer. In fact, it had been there the whole time. It had only used its psychic shield to resist the sandstorm, and then used an illusion to conceal all traces of illogical behavior. Once Butterfly appeared, Tyrant Bear roared. Gravity enveloped it. Countless gravel turned into a large hand and closed from both sides. Butterfly didn't disappear again, nor did it dodge. It was just that Xiao raised his hand and snapped his fingers. Tap! In everyone's eyes, the two big gravel hands that were closing together suddenly dissipated. Tyrant Bear's huge body also shook violently. It fell heavily to the ground. Chapter 278, Ancient City, Ghost City. There was dead silence on the beach. Only the sound of Tyrant Bear falling to the ground echoed in everyone's ears. They all recalled the scene just now. Why did Tyrant Bear suddenly fall? The sprite trainer of the silly bear kept shouting, "Stand up, quickly stand up for me. I'll give you 10 bags of snacks. 50 bags. 100 bags." Be it shouting or sprite commandeering, persist, Tyrant Bear didn't respond. It fainted very peacefully. The brawny man and the sprite trainers from the other nations couldn't understand. But neither could the sprite trainers from Dragon Nation. Mentor Ma nodded thoughtfully. A certain Dragon City University instructor next door also looked thoughtful. The two of them turned and made eye contact. From meeting eyes, they could tell that they were both only pretending to understand. Gurgle. Butterfly flew back to the throne above Xiao's head under everyone's gaze. Like a slightly heavier hat, scratch that, like a doll covering his head. Then, he glanced at the interface. Turns out Butterfly didn't consume much energy. That's normal. That Tyrant Bear wasn't very strong to begin with, and its mental resistance was very weak. In terms of physical defense, the Tyrant Bear was very outstanding. In comparison, its intelligence, its resistance towards certain directions wasn't very good, and it didn't have any special training. Therefore, Xiao came up with the strategy of not exposing information. From the beginning to the end, the butterfly only used a single unique skill, spiritual explosion. Half a second after Xiao snapped his fingers, he had ignited the mental imprint that had been stacking on Tyrant Bear's body since the start of the battle. There were more than 100 of them. Tyrant Bear, whose mental strength was so weak, didn't even realize that a bomb had already been planted in its head. Even if there were sprites with strong mental power and good perception around, they could only detect some fleeting fluctuations. It was very difficult for anyone to understand the reason for Tyrant Bear's death. The reason for its fall. Even if they did manage to discover it, Butterfly still had other hidden trump cards. Xiao believed that there was no other way. There were many foreign sprite trainers around. In the context of ruin exploration, they were competitors, or even enemies. It was very necessary to conceal information from the enemy. The 24 battles quickly ended. Dragon Nation won 12 rounds, lost 12 rounds, 50-50. The nations came to an agreement that the first batch of exploration slots will contain 36 people from Dragon Nation, 15 from Peacock Nation, 9 from the Korean nation, 8 from Stone Elephant nation, and 5 from the other 5 small nations. Overall, Mentor Ma paused and said, the second batch, which will depart either half a day or a day after the first, will probably still have the same limit on the number of people. But there probably won't be a limit starting from the third batch. In reality, however, there was no actual limit placed by the entrance. The restriction was simply to give the first batch of people half a day of head start. It gave Dragon, Peacock, and the few other leading nations an advantage over the others. Mentor Ma continued, I've discussed with the others. The first batch of people from our Whale Island University is. He chose Wang Qi, Zhang Zihuqi, and Qin Ye, and 2 other seniors who didn't deserve to be named. And Su Hao. Then, he looked at the others and said, all of you wait patiently for the next batch. When the time comes, you'll enter under Instructor Wang's lead. Any objections? The group of people expressed their compliance. It made Su Hao, who originally wanted to say that he could give up the slot and wait for the second batch, completely unable to find an opportunity to interrupt. Forget it, forget it. I'm too outstanding after all. I'm bound to be in the first batch of explorers no matter what. Based on the discussion between Mentor Ma and the others, that ruin is also relatively safe. There wasn't much of a problem. The sun had yet to fall. The heavenly kings who were evaluating the security level opposite the entrance returned. Senior Wu. When he saw that Senior Wu was present among the big bosses, Su Hao was immediately relieved. No wonder there was no news from the replies he sent to Senior Wu previously. So he had crossed over and didn't have access to the internet. At this moment, Senior Wu was still wearing a suit and tie. His hair was neatly combed and shiny black. With one look, one could tell he had not been in any battles. The situation over there is already clear, said Senior Wu. There are no traces of any alien tribes within a radius of thousands of miles, nor are there any high-risk sprites. That area is even very desolate. We only located a dead ancient city in the Gobi Desert. The ancient city has been abandoned, but surprisingly, part of the facilities are still operational. Heavenly King Wu had given out the information quickly. After all, there was no point in stalling since the other Heavenly King Sprite trainers would announce it anyway. Outside the ancient city, there's a huge barrier. The barrier doesn't stop us humans, but all sprites above monarch rank will be blocked outside the barrier. According to speculation, it should be the city's automatic defense system. It probably determined that monarch rank is a threat, so it blocked them outside. Even if you use sprite commandeering from within the city, sprites will still not be able to enter from outside the barrier. A barrier that could block summoning. None of the people present were fools. Just by hearing it, they realized the value of this barrier and technology. Because right now, the Union's barrier couldn't stop the summoning. No, maybe there is. Maybe I just don't know about it. Su Hao thought. But his curiosity and butterfly's money-mindedness were indeed stirred up by Senior Wu. Before long, the first batch of members of the Union's exploration team gathered. The entrance was in a forest at the center of the island. At a glance, it was easy to tell that the bald spot in the lush greenery was the entrance. It was like an old man's balding hair, especially eye-catching. Some of the trees around the entrance were pushed away, and modern weapons were installed. There were also sprite trainers stationed around. The first batch of sprite trainers and sprites lined up. They entered in the following order: one from Dragon Nation, one from Japanese Nation, another from Dragon Nation, one from Peacock Nation, and so on. Before long, Su Hao arrived at the opposite side of the entrance. What welcomed him was a field of desolation. Sand danced in the air, and some hills and ravines could be seen in the distance. But the most eye-catching was still the huge city not far away. The city wall stood tall, but some weeds could be seen growing out of the cracks in the bricks, full of traces of time. Is this the ruins of the ancient city? Why does it feel a little gloomy? In the group of more than 10 people, Senior Qinya hugged her Holy Spirit bird and kept looking around. I keep feeling that something is staring at us. Su Hao glanced around. Tall buildings. For the time being, they were tall black monolith-shaped buildings. They seemed to have absorbed the sunlight around them, causing the sky to become much darker. In addition to the dead silence of the ancient city, in an environment where only the footsteps of the people could be heard, they indeed gave off an uncomfortable feeling. No need to rely on feeling, I can tell you with certainty that something is staring at us, Su Hao said, glancing at the interface. What is it? Ghost. Senior Qinya hugged the Holy Spirit bird tightly, making the bird constantly gurgle as it was being suffocated. The other two seniors also hugged each other nervously. It felt a little strange. It's a ghost element sprite. Su Hao looked at a broken wall covered in vines. After asking Mentor Ma for his opinion, he let Butterfly's mental power spread out and vibrate violently in that direction. Buzz. As if the strings of a zither were plucked, circles of invisible power spread out. A few shapeless black shadows suddenly appeared and made jijij sounds. They sounded like they came from the clouds and kept echoing in his ears. But the next moment... Gurgle. Butterfly's mental power shook again. A few ghost element sprites, who were clearly not strong but especially fond of courting death, finally sensed that there was a big boss in front of them that they couldn't afford to offend and scattered. But right after, more ghost element sprites sensed their lively aura and approached. Chapter 279, Challenges, Inheritance. Tisk, tisk, tisk. He 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 he. Ga ga ga. Invisible shadows emerged from the corners of the walls. They were either dream demons, dream-eating demons, or nightmare terrors. They belonged to the same evolutionary pathway. To put it simply, they were sprites from the same race, but their appearances were too similar. In the eyes of outsiders, they all seemed like invisible shadows. Su Hao could only vaguely see different shapes under the black shadow. A real mosaic sprite. It was rare to see ghost element sprites on ordinary days, but now that they appeared, there were dozens of them. Once their numbers increased, it immediately caused the surrounding environment to change. The temperature seemed to have dropped by more than 10 degrees, and the light also became darker, as if they couldn't see the end of the road, only strange cries kept echoing. Senior Qinya, as well as the other male seniors, couldn't stand it anymore, and goosebumps started appearing on their skin. Senior Qinya lowered her head, and her beautiful hair covered her face. Her body trembled, as if she was scared to her limit, so she threw out the Holy Spirit bird. Coo! The Holy Spirit bird flew 2.5 laps in the air. Its tiny body exuded an extremely warm glow. In an instant, the cold and dark ghost element energy melted like snow. Many nightmare and dream-eater demons shrieked and quickly escaped into the surrounding black buildings, disappearing. Only a few dream demons fell to the ground. The mosaic on their bodies. Cough, the black mist on their bodies had already disappeared, revealing their original bodies. It had a round body the size of a basketball, a pair of big round eyes, and a pair of small and short hands. At first glance, it looked pretty cute. Senior Qinya, who was obsessed with looks, immediately stopped shaking. She even dared to step forward and poke it. Her fingers went right through it. Over the long years, this ancient city has birthed many ghost element sprites, said Mentor Ma. But ghost element sprites aren't very strong. They weren't just weak compared to Mentor Ma, but everyone present as well. Among the group of mosaic ghosts just now, there were already more than a dozen of elite level ones. If it was an ordinary sprite trainer here, they would have long been squeezed dry, a true nightmare terror. However, these intruders and the extraordinary level sprites were much stronger than ordinary sprite trainers. The ones that truly need to fear, should be the native ghosts in the ancient city. So, don't worry. The best way to eliminate fear is to keep the enemy afraid. Mentor Ma nagged for a bit, but it was actually for one purpose. Removing their uneasiness, they explored their own ways. There were more than 10 people in their team. Apart from Whale Island University, there were also students and instructors from Dragon City University and other Sprite universities. They were all master level, and completely capable of moving alone. On the contrary, not only was it inefficient to gather together, but what happened if one of them found a high-value treasure? Who would the treasure belong to? It's recommended to act alone or travel in groups of 2. If anyone encountered danger, they could just fire the signal flare. Of course, Xiao traveled alone. With Butterfly, Dazed Crow, Dumb Unicorn, and Big Fat Bear, the 4 extraordinary guards, the sense of security was quite sufficient. He even had an extra bright night spirit that had come along to watch the show. In the case of danger, he could even call for backup. He chose a direction and departed directly. Before departing, he saw that some seniors still chose to team up. Senior A teamed up with Senior B, while Senior C teamed up with Senior D. After leaving the team, the feeling Ghost City gave off was even more deathly silent and cold. Only the faint red glow emitted by the dull crow could bring him a hint of warmth. Who exactly built the ancient city? What kind of civilization existed here in the past? Did the Union excavate similar ruins? He had asked all 3 questions to Senior Wu, who couldn't answer the first 2. As for the third question, the Union did discover similar ancient cities, but very, very few. The Union is also unsure why the civilization behind the ancient cities disappeared. At the moment, most of the buildings in the ancient city were well preserved, and many facilities were still running. It didn't look like they were fleeing in panic after encountering external enemies. Then how did this city get abandoned? He thought about it. If he couldn't think of an answer, he wouldn't think about it anymore. He was just an ordinary university monk. It wasn't his place to worry about the nation's affairs and the future of the Union. Let's do something practical. Xiao looked around. Due to the aura emitted by the dazed crow, there were no more blind ghost element sprites harassing him. But, there were still some ghost element sprites secretly spying on them. Capture a few natives and get information. Xiao looked at Butterfly. Butterfly looked at Crow, Bear, and Unicorn and sighed. It helplessly accepted that ghost catching was now its responsibility. Gurgle. It made the dumb crow withdraw its aura. Instantly, the light red glow on Crow's body disappeared, and the temperature dropped. Tisk tisk came from all directions again. As expected, the native ghosts here were all rather stubborn. Buzz. Butterfly's eyes lit up, and an invisible mental attack exploded in front of it. Balls of black shadows floating in midair suddenly fell, and the black mist surrounding them had already become very thin. They let out a strange cry, and indeed, they only knew how to escape after they were beaten up again. But at this moment, 2 spiritual pearls flew over and hit 2 nightmare terrors. Dong dong! Their illusory bodies froze when they were hit by the spiritual pearl. The whole ghost was stunned. When they regained their senses, they saw a large white bear on the left looking down at them, thunder arcs coming out of its palm. A large firebird on the right staring at them with fire in its eyes, spewing flames from its mouth from time to time. A water blue beast stepping its hooves continuously. It seemed to have thought of something and spat out a ball of cold air fiercely. Puff! The 2 nightmare terrors swayed. Suddenly, they felt more comfortable. Slap! Xiao kicked the dumb unicorn away and walked in front of the 2 native ghosts. He crossed his arms and lowered his eyes. On the left and right, under the contrast of the bear and crow, lightning, and flames, he looked coldly at the 2 ghosts. Their illusory bodies started trembling from the bottom up. The 2 nightmare terrors that looked like they were about to cry from fear quickly gave up their past. Ugh! According to them, those 2 nightmare terrors have been drifting in the ancient city ever since they were born, absorbing some kind of energy that made them feel very comfortable. One day, they suddenly evolved. The two ghosts didn't know how old they were, but Xiao could tell. They were more than 100 years old. They had lived a boring and dull life for more than a century. The range of activity is also limited to the ancient city. The barrier outside the city not only obstructs foreign monarch ranks, but also prevents ghost-type sprites born from the ancient city. It made him feel like the ancient city was a breeding ground for ghost element sprites. But all kinds of traces indicated that there used to be intelligent races living here, and it was very likely that they were also humans. The problem is that even ghosts don't know much, so what exactly? Xiao shook his head violently. Why was he worrying so much about the Union again? That was a problem that only big bosses needed to consider. He continued to explore the ancient city, occasionally catching a few native ghosts to interrogate them. Time ticked by. He didn't encounter any danger, but he didn't gain anything either. Giant monolith-shaped buildings surrounded them. The doors and windows were hard to find. Even if some walls were smashed open, the interior was just like ordinary families. The facilities and furniture were similar to theirs. It was just that the style was different, and most of it was black. Apart from being able to judge that the people who used to live in this city were probably humans. At the very least, humanoid creatures, there were no other gains. The rare materials that he could occasionally find also lost all their energy over the endless years. They were useless. But that's not right. Since the ancient city can give birth to ghost element sprites, correspondingly, precious materials can be born. Where are the precious materials? Gurgle. Butterfly looked around and spread its perception. It also wanted to ask. Where was the money? Gurgle. Gurgle, gurgle. Butterfly, whose antennae kept spinning and probing, suddenly discovered abnormal fluctuations in a certain direction. It immediately flew to the throne above Xiao's head and sat down. It made a fist and waved it upwards. Gurgle. Charging duck. Xiao's team immediately rushed in the direction Butterfly pointed. Before long, icons representing precious materials finally appeared on the interface map. Countless icons overlapped. It was the direction in which Butterfly sensed the waves. Tears welled up in Xiao's eyes. A moment later, Dumb Unicorn rushed out of Black Slate Street. It arrived at an empty square. Around the square, huge stone tablets pierced into the ground like giant swords, surrounding the round square inside. Xiao saw faint traces of a barrier at the connections of the stone monuments. Gurgle. Butterfly also said that it sensed the ripples of the barrier. It was more obvious than the large-scale barrier covering the entire ancient city. Gurgle. But when he got closer, Xiao discovered that there were actually many people outside the square and under the stone tablet. They were also from the first batch. He looked around and saw a member of the Dragon City University team who looked a little familiar but couldn't remember his name. He went forward and asked, "What are you doing here?" When this certain minor character from Dragon City University realized Xiao was the person who had ruined his chance of winning the championship, he was initially unwilling to respond. But after realizing that Xiao had contributed to his slot in the first batch, he had no choice but to reply honestly, "This place seems to be a certain heritage point in the ancient city. As long as one passes it, they will be rewarded. There didn't seem to be any gains elsewhere, so basically everyone came here." He reluctantly added, "Someone has already gotten the reward, not just the precious materials, but also the creations from the ancient civilization. The sprite trainer who just got the prize has already left in a hurry." Not far away, a muscular man wrapped in a headscarf walked out, went under a huge stone tablet, and pressed his hand on the stone tablet. Several lights flowed from the bottom to the top of the stone tablet. The next moment, the figure of the brawny man wrapped in a headscarf actually appeared in the square. He was teleported in. At the same time, profound symbols appeared on the surrounding stone tablets, shining slightly. It was a language that Xiao didn't understand at all, and symbols were all crooked like ghost drawings. But after taking a few more looks, he actually understood the meaning behind it. First stage, strength test. Push the black stone mountain out by 102.4 meters in 30 seconds. Seconds and meters probably weren't the measurement units of the ancient city civilization itself, but those ghostly symbols could be transformed into information that he himself could understand. What kind of technology was this? Before he could think, he noticed another change in the square. A certain black stone tablet shot out light beams and interweaved in the square, constructing a small black stone mountain 8 to 9 meters tall. An illusion. Xiao looked at Butterfly. The serious-looking brainiac Butterfly nodded slightly. Gurgle. It isn't completely real? Well, it makes sense. If it were, then it'd be creating something from nothing. One of the members of Dragon City's school team glanced at Xiao, then at the butterfly fairy that he didn't know how to describe. When he heard their conversation, he was dumbstruck. On the square, a strong man wrapped in a headscarf summoned the sprites outside the square. Tyrant Bear, Ground Wolf, Elephant General. Earth element sprites were pretty common, but these had pretty good potential. Among them, only Tyrant Bear was extraordinary level. Yes, the one that fainted after Xiao snapped his fingers. In the eyes of the many sprite trainers in Peacock Nation, however, an extraordinary level sprite was an embarrassment. But it wasn't weak, especially in terms of strength. Roar! The silly bear let out a roar. Together with the three sprites, Ground Wolf and Elephant General, it pushed the small black stone mountain with a rumble. About 22 seconds later, they pushed it out to 102.4 meters. In an instant, the symbols on the stone tablet changed, and the small black stone mountain gradually turned illusory, turning into a stream of light and flying into a stone tablet. First stage completed. A stone platform rose from the square. Some items were placed above it. They were rewards. Many people stretched out their necks or simply looked over with sprite commandeering, summon. Xiao could see even more clearly on the interface the precious icon had moved just now. 2 precious materials, worth about 100 credits. It wasn't too valuable. After all, it was only the first stage. The symbols on the stone tablet started to change again. Second stage, dance, sprite. Fly 2 laps around the square in 30 seconds. Instantly, a round runway was drawn on the periphery of the square. Numbers appeared on the stone tablet, and the countdown started. But the brawny man in the headscarf was stunned. None of his 3 sprites had wings, nor did they know how to step on air. This was an unreasonable request. In just a moment, when General Elephant stepped onto the running track and came into contact with the ground, the brawny man in the headscarf was judged to have failed the second round. He and the 3 sprites were teleported out together. You didn't do this to the last guy. Give me another chance. The brawny man kept hitting the stone tablet, but there was no response. The explorers from the surrounding countries started to think. Everyone only has one chance to challenge the stone tablet. Besides, the content of the levels is very likely to be random. At least within a certain range. The brawny man in the headscarf lost miserably, but as a sprite trainer who was considered an embarrassment, his failure didn't affect everyone. Before long, the next warrior went on stage. He passed the first 2 levels in different forms and lost to the 3rd level. The sprite will be beaten 100 times. The symbols were all translated. But this warrior had also revealed new information. Cough, new information about the rules, you were allowed to surrender. Xiao took a look and felt much more relieved. From the looks of it, it's indeed a safe and harmless challenge. It's very likely it's something the ancient city had prepared for their sprite trainers in the past. And since the inhabitants of these ancient civilizations were probably also humans, it would make sense that we were also able to take on the challenge. It wasn't a guess without basis. Aliens were known to be very similar to inhabitants of planet Aquamarine. Thus, it wasn't unreasonable to guess that they were also humans. At this moment, more and more explorers surrounded the square. There were already 6 people who had participated in the challenge. The best one had already reached the 5th level. And the prizes? There were precious materials, unknown medicines, and rewards that could directly be infused into sprites to increase their strength. However, the expressions of the surrounding sprite trainers became increasingly solemn. The challenges are too random. Yet, Big Boss Yan Chuan is a quasi-heavenly king, but even he lost in the 3rd round. This is simply making things difficult for me. Seeing a big boss kneeling in the 3rd or even 2nd stage, a group of restless sprite trainers stopped. There was only one chance, so it would be more wise if they observed and collected more information. There might still be key rules that they have yet to discover. Sprite trainers from all nations gave way one after another. Please. No, no, you came first. You first. No, you are the guest, you guys go first. These words were all being translated by sprites. For a time, sprite cries were heard in various languages. Xiao held his chin and recalled the 15 different levels that had just appeared. They all seemed doable. Then go ahead. Chapter 280, I bet, he will definitely kneel. Under each huge stone tablet was a shallow palm silhouette. As long as one pressed on it, they would be able to open the challenge inheritance. In the beginning, the stone tablet was only activated when a curious brother laid his hand on it. At this point, the onlookers were all hesitant to move forward, so it was up to Xiao to step forward bravely. When the extras, when the students from Dragon City University saw this, they asked, "Why don't you wait a little longer and collect more information? Maybe then you'd be able to pass 2 more stages. We're explorers, we can't be so inflexible and stubborn." Xiao said casually. "The ancient city is really big, you know, if I fail here, I'll just go somewhere else to look for opportunities." "You're right." Ignoring the enlightened look of a senior, Xiao turned to Butterfly as it looked at him with a gaze. "Butterfly, we are explorers, which means we must have a spirit for exploration and research, so, why don't you go ahead and try pressing it?" In its normal form, Butterfly had a palm was the same size as a miner's. Its body was different from humans, but there really wasn't much difference when it came to palm prints. But it did have a big head. Butterfly wanted to ignore the stupid sprite trainer, but after pondering for a while, it couldn't control its curiosity. With a bang, it returned to its original state. Its soft body flew to the bottom of the stone tablet, where it was like a black wall. It stretched out its palm, slowly, and finally pressed on the outline of that palm. Beep. That was Xiao's own voiceover. The huge stone tablet didn't move at all. As expected, the challenge was meant for human sprite trainers. Xiao reached out and pressed it. Buzz, a few streams of light spread out from the center of the palm print. In the next moment, a force that he couldn't feel enveloped him. When he regained his senses, he had already appeared inside the square. It was 200 meters away from where he was just now. If not for the fact that he was mentally prepared, he would have broken out in a cold sweat on such a hot day. Was spatial teleportation always this awesome? He then thought of the sprite trainer's protective barrier. It could block attacks, but it just so happened that it couldn't deal with this kind of teleportation. Senior Wu's psychic power. Trading Puppet's psychic grab or the rolling waves couldn't trigger the barrier either. This barrier would be much more useful than unique skills when dealing with sprite trainers. He was thinking too far ahead again. He stretched out his hands and spread his fingers. In an instant, Butterfly and Dazed Crow were the first to make an appearance. After 2 seconds, he silently chanted Sprite commandeering, summon. The white, fat and big fat bear, as well as the domineering-looking dumb unicorn, also appeared. Last was the cheerleader, Bright Knights. Phew. At the same time, the contents of the first assessment had already appeared. It was the challenge Push the Black Stone Mountain, which was also the one with the highest frequency among the contents of the first stage. Butterfly had already flown forward. After going around the black stone mountain twice, it enveloped its perception with the spirit of research. Then, it stretched out its hand and knocked on it and even wanted to take a piece of it home. The palm formed by its psychic power pushed on it, but it didn't move. It could only sigh in disappointment. With its hand supporting its chin, legs crossed, and its knees slightly bent, it hung in midair like it was sitting on a soft sofa and continued to observe the black stone mountain. At this point, the countdown on the stone tablet had already begun. The big fat bear, whose paw was pressed against the black stone mountain, started exerting force. Howl! The bear clan's power erupted abruptly. For a moment, boom, boom, the whole stone mountain slowly moved. The dumb unicorn also tilted its head sideways and used its strength to push forward. Phew-phew phew-phew. Little Bright Knight's cheers made the big fatty bear work even harder. At this point, there were a few more sprite trainers outside the square. Whether it was the older audience or the new audience, they all stared unblinkingly at Xiao and the sprites inside. They were afraid of missing out on any details. Currently, only 3 different types assessments have been used for the first stage. The second stage of the assessment isn't difficult either, but be careful, one of the possible assessment requires sprites to know how to fly. Even if you don't have a flying sprite, if you have one that can get into the air for a short period of time with enough speed, you can also pass. But if you have a flying sprite, that's basically a free stage with no effort required. Our Dragon Nation's sprite trainers are pretty lucky. The one who spoke was a young man in white who held a fan in his hand. When the young man saw that many Dragon Nation sprite trainers were looking at him, he opened his fan and looked into the square. I, by Xiao, have already analyzed the 15 types of assessment content that have appeared so far and concluded some patterns. The challenges of the ancient city are actually assessing the comprehensive ability of our team's sprite. It has to have strength, be able to fly, be able to extinguish fire, be as immovable as a mountain, be resistant to hammering, isolate detection, cut through everything, and so on. But if the sprite is inferior in some aspects, we can also make up for it through unique skills and secret techniques. For example, one can use unique skills instead of strength alone to push the stone mountain. In most of the stages, I've found the easiest method to pass. Except for the stage old brother Yan Chuan encountered just now. He was really unlucky. Bai Xiaoming looked at the symbols on the stone tablet, and his eyes gradually widened. Third stage, Defense Counterattack. Defeat all enemies in 30 seconds with just defensive moves. It's the same stage that Big Boss Yan Chuan encountered just now. A Dragon Nation sprite trainer cursed secretly. Why do we have such bad luck? Bai Xiaoming frowned. The key to this stage is to use defensive unique skills to defeat the enemy. Currently, defensive unique skills with killing power include Ring of Fire Resistance and Armor of Thorns, but the destructive power of those unique skills are too weak. Just now, the quasi-heavenly king sprite trainer Yan Chuan had a sprite use the Ring of Fire Resistance, but it was clearly far from enough to defeat all the enemies. In the 20th second, Yan Chuan changed his strategy and made his sprite spray out a sea of fire. He wanted to see if it would work since it wasn't a unique skill, but he was directly eliminated. Bai Xiaoming looked at the person inside. What will he do? Will he also stop at the third stage? At this moment, in the square. Like before, it created illusions. In just a moment, 5 illusionary figures appeared around him. They looked a little like nightmare terrors, but they were dazed. As soon as they appeared, pitch-black energy balls condensed in front of them. They were shadow energy balls. They looked somewhat similar to dark element energy balls, but their characteristics were completely different. It was fast and ghostly. Energy balls flew over and exploded in mid-air. It hit the psychic shield set up by Butterfly. Gurgle. The attack strength seems to be roughly at early stage elite level, it's not that strong. But the difficult part right now wasn't the strength of their attack, but how to get rid of the 5 illusionary figures without attacking. Xiao had a plan. Your turn. He looked at the big fat bear. The bear howled and spread its arms. Thunder God Battle Armor Fusion. In less than a second, a bluish-purple battle armor appeared on its body, and the speed of its release became even faster. After putting on the battle armor, the big fat bear made another AO sound, and its voice became domineering. The whole bear was so confident that it stepped out of the range of the psychic shield without any fear and faced the incoming shadow energy ball. Bang! The exploded energy ball turned into wisps of black smoke, as if it wanted to wrap around the big fat bear, but in the next moment, it was wiped out by the lightning energy on the armor. The big fat bear looked even more confident. It stretched out its bear paw and made a provocative gesture. Howl! Who else? However, no one paid any attention to it. They could only urge it to hurry up. If you can't do it, the game time might even be halved. The confident tyrannical bear's face fell. It didn't dare to waste any more time. It took a few steps forward and arrived in front of a fake ghost. With its big belly, it immediately exploded the energy ball that it had just condensed. The exploding shadow energy came from the same source as the shadow. It didn't cause any damage to the opponent, but it triggered the thunder arc of the battle armor. That was a passive ability. As long as it was attacked, it would crackle. Blue-purple thunder arcs shot out. The shadow, which wasn't weak and could last more than 10 seconds under the grilling of the ring of fire, was directly pierced through like a bubble. Bam! That sound shocked some of the audience as it proved their initial thoughts wrong. Some foreign sprite trainers who were just laughing and thinking, as expected, Dragon Nation is going to fail again, suddenly froze. It only dealt with 1 illusion, there are still 4 left, and now there's only 22 seconds left. 1 took up 8 seconds, 5 would need 40 seconds. Some foreign sprite trainers started laughing again. The Dragon Nation's sprite trainers stared unblinkingly, and some clenched their fists nervously. In the square, the big fat bear started to dawdle for a long while. It glanced at the time and got scared. If it couldn't complete the mission, then its bear life will only be gloomy. For the game, for the tribe, for Boss Butterfly, this bear will work hard. It didn't dare to use the secret manual of Meatball Thunderball, and only ran out in large strides, came in front of another shadow, and suddenly stopped. At this moment, the big fat bear didn't wait for the shadow to cast the energy ball. Instead, it raised its head and stuck out its chest, sticking right onto it. There was no collision, only light contact. But in an instant, when the armor seemed to be passing through the illusory figure, sizzle! The MVP Thunder Arc appeared again, swimming around the armor and directly extinguishing the shadow. When the countdown stopped at 5 seconds, the symbol's pass appeared. The bear had completed its mission. Ooh! The big fat bear, which had heaved a sigh of relief, sat on the ground. Its armor and stone slab collided, producing kuong kuong sounds. At the same time, a stone platform rose in the center of the square, on which were 2 small black bottles. Xiao walked forward. Ding! Intelligence points +1. Ding! Intelligence points +1. He paused for a moment before picking up the 2 small black bottles and looking at the interface. It's not a rare ingredient, but it's actually labeled as a certain type of medicine that can moderately increase the quality of various aspects. The increase shouldn't be as great as treasures like the heart of the 1,000-year tree. There didn't seem to be any side effects, and the manufacturing cost isn't very high. However, it wouldn't be worth it for him to use it. Xiao could hand it over to Dragon Nation and it would be considered as a great contribution. However, he also had an immature idea, which was to try and research it himself. After all, he was a high-level sprite cultivator with a personal laboratory. He passed the next few stages very smoothly. 4th stage, the sprite will be beaten 100 times. This assessment is very difficult. Someone in the previous stage couldn't even withstand 100 strikes in the third stage, let alone 150 now. I bet that the Dragon Nation's sprite trainer will definitely kneel in this stage. Not long later. Bang! Sizzle! At the 50th hit, a certain sledgehammer that had turned into reality was annihilated by the lightning force reflected by the armor. The big fat bear had an innocent look on its face. A question mark appeared above one of the sprite trainer's head. But the rules didn't forbid it. Xiao took away the prize and heard it again. Ding! Intelligence points +1. Fifth stage, breaking through the barrier. A black gate appeared, bound by countless chains. It was tightly closed without any gaps. A sprite trainer said. The person who held the record from before was also defeated here. Mr. Kongji's gargoyle dragon has an extraordinary high level, but it couldn't break the black gate within the stipulated time. I bet this young Dragon Nation sprite trainer definitely can't do it either. So, the next second. Bang! Lightning erupted, illuminating the dark square in a bluish-purple color. It also blasted a large gap in the tightly closed black gate wrapped in chains. Dragon Nation's sprite trainer, damn! The foreign sprite trainer, impossible. Absolutely impossible. No one noticed that a lightning mark suddenly appeared on the Thunder Bear's forehead, then quickly faded and disappeared. The prize appeared, and a beam of light enveloped the big fat bear. At the same time, Xiao heard, ding! Intelligence points +2. Sixth stage, stone slicing ball. Within 30 seconds, cut off all the stone balls falling from the sky without using spiritual force. Stone balls appeared in the air and fell rapidly. The number gradually increased, and some stone balls also turned from physical to illusionary. A sprite trainer spoke again. Without using spiritual force, it's impossible to cut off those illusionary rocks. The spiritual pearls flew out, and stone balls shattered one after another. Xiao picked up the item, and a familiar prompt sounded in his ears again. Ding! Intelligence points +3. Seventh stage, hide and seek. Find the 100 ghost element sprites hiding in the square within 30 seconds. The countdown started. The whole square was silent, without any changes. A certain sprite trainer said again. If it were just regular ghost element sprites hiding, they might leave traces, but right now, the 100 illusionary ghost element sprites are directly produced in the square, it's impossible to find them. I bet. What are you guys doing? Woo! Butterfly used its unique skill, spiritual perception. Its eyes closed for 4 to 5 seconds before suddenly opening. It sprayed out many light dots, turning into illusionary butterflies in the air. It flapped its wings and plunged into the ground. In just 10 seconds, ghost element sprites with dazed eyes were chased out. A sheepskin scroll appeared, and a familiar voice continued to ring in his ears. Ding! Intelligence points +5. Eighth stage. A certain sprite trainer, woo woo woo. Let go of me. Xiao heard it again. Ding! Intelligence points +3. Xiao had already broken the record and far exceeded it. At this point, even the envious and jealous foreign sprite trainers couldn't say anything. He just grabbed the key points of the guide and covered a certain sprite trainer's mouth. Time ticked, and new symbols appeared on the stone tablet again. Ninth stage, battle assessment. Defeat the 5 sprites in front of you. In an instant, light beams shot out of the stone tablet, turning illusion into reality, interweaving into 5 nightmare terrors covered in thick black mist with terrifying auras. GGGG echoed. The extraordinary aura pressure exerted waves of cold wind and kept howling in the sky above the square. A sprite trainer broke free from the others. Ha 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 ha, the Dragon Nation sprite trainer will definitely lose this time. His sprites aren't strong, they just have comprehensive skills and happen to encounter the right questions. But right now, the 9th stage is a test of hard ability, there's no way to take advantage of it. The nightmare terrors that those few transformed into are also not ordinary extraordinary. It's the ghost element again. When stacked together, the threat level increased by several times. I bet that he'll definitely kneel at this level.